you have these like super high IQ people that have like these amazing business ideas, but they will think through like every reason in which it can go wrong, and then they don't take action. That's really what differentiates, entrepreneurs from, regular people. Like, we're willing to take the risk. We legitimately have created the best laundry experience in the world. So like when you're like the Rolls Royce of laundry, like everything else is a downgrade. You might have gone from 300K a month, like 500K a month, boom, overnight. Generally, subscription businesses do better than like one-time businesses. I don't think I'll be starting any e-commerce companies that don't have a subscription component to it. What's this WordPress thing? Oh, I learned how to build all these websites and so forth. Then, really got deep into how to build software, but I'd never built a physical product before. So that was like totally foreign. So one of the things that we did is
Ian Blair, it is awesome to see you outside of the snow. Thank you so much for carving out some time.
Absolutely. Pleasure to be talking with you. And yeah, we had an absolute blast at Baldface a couple weeks ago.
Baldface was ridiculous. Let's recap that in a second. A little backdrop on you. You currently launched and run a company called Laundry Sauce, but your backdrop was a no-code app building platform that you built to 15,000 users, 15,000 customers, 30 million users across the platform. And you took about 10 years to do that before selling it. Laundry Sauce you built from 0 to 10 million in 18 months. So I want to dig into all that, including in addition, your obsession with race cars. But let's start with eCom. What is the most overrated strategy in eCom that you see people doing right now?
Hiring lots of people. Yeah, because I think e-commerce is one of the most scalable business models. I think there's very few companies that you get like that big of a point of leverage. I was talking with Dan actually, and I think it's like eCom and info products. Like those are the two where you can probably have like the largest amount of revenue with the fewest amount of employees. I'm sure there's other like niche businesses, but kind of like broadly speaking, I think those are, two of the most scalable business models. Cause I think it's pretty rare to see like software companies that are, 10, 20, 30, 50 million in revenue without tons and tons of employees.
Ecom's interesting because similar to info products, you can jump in really quickly if you want to.
Yeah.
Or you can build everything yourself and it can be a huge lift. Do you white label or do you build everything yourself?
Well, I would say the majority of e-commerce companies are probably using co-manufacturers. And I think that's, pretty standard. I mean, there's some guys that, have in-house manufacturing, and maybe at a certain scale, it does make sense, depending on your product and like kind of the technical challenges. But yeah, we've partnered with some outstanding manufacturers, and it seems to be kind of like standard practice. So, because you can kind of approach e-commerce a few different ways. Like, kind of the lightest lift is doing something like drop shipping, where you're effectively selling someone else's product. And then once you start working with co-mans, like you are developing your own product in a sense. They might have some off-the-shelf stuff, but you're typically designing something new or unique with your product, and then you can actually build a brand around it.
Well, I want to get back to that concept because I think the concept of white labeling today, as the world has gotten more and more fragmented and distributed, it's more accessible and it's easier to do that stuff. And there are good and bad points to it. But the flip side of this is the other end of your experience is SaaS.
Yeah.
What do people do with SaaS that looks really attractive or seems smart on the front end, but is actually really stupid?
I think oftentimes people end up picking businesses without like thinking through like all the implications of like what it takes to scale it. And I see this all the time, where it's like where people start almost like with the idea first and then try to back into a business rather than like, what's the most efficient type of business and like what are the characteristics of that? And then how do I fit a product inside of that model? And that's essentially what I did with Laundry Sauce, whereas Buildfire, I actually started off white labeling, right? So I was fascinated by mobile apps and, just started building them essentially, and then found another white label app builder that I, slapped my logo on and built a couple hundred apps. And I was just really kind of fixated on that opportunity. And, selling hundreds, and thousands of mobile apps is very difficult, right? And I'd say that was probably something I didn't think all the way through, and it just made it a much more challenging business to scale, compared to Laundry Sauce, where I was essentially trying to play a bit more like game theory optimal. Like, what are the characteristics of the fastest growing e-commerce companies? Now I need to plug an idea into that, and then it worked.
Yeah, I love that. I want to hear more about the path with Buildfire because I knew that you had started with the white labeling side of things. And that decision tree over time is super interesting. I think you kind of have two different camps for entrepreneurs. You have the people that sort of fall into it, and then you have the people that seek it out. And a lot of the time when you ask people how they got into something, like, oh, how'd you get into that? 95% of the time it's, oh, I just sort of fell into it.
Yeah, I'll give you a
Right.
perfect example. I was talking to a fellow at this weekend. It was at Thermal. It was kind of like a little group of entrepreneurs, out tracking their cars and so forth. And this guy was in mattresses, and mattresses is definitely not something I would want to get into for e-commerce, just because you buy a mattress and then when are you going to buy another one, like a decade later? And that was exactly his thing. He was just, he bought a mattress online. He's like, hey, like this looks like an interesting business. I want to get into it. And then, he said in hindsight, he's like, yeah, I wish I picked like an easier business. So, because it's hard to expand like LTV, with mattresses. So, and then he had some other e-commerce projects that he was working on that had scaled, significantly faster. So, but then on the other hand, like I do have one of my investors in Laundry Sauce, like he scaled a mattress company from 0 to 200 million in 2 years. So,
Yeah, I have a good buddy in Austin, Ricky Joshi, who owns Satva, and he's also been on the show. But they're multi-$100 million mattress company. But I don't know the point of origin. I can't remember how they dove into it or why. But yeah, it's functionally also. I mean, mattresses for a long time, super heavy, hard to ship, commodity. It's like it seems like it would be a race to the bottom in general with that product. And like you said, you buy one every 10 years, maybe.
yeah. Yeah, it seems like brand is hard to defend there. I mean, well, I guess maybe you have like, the Tempur-Pedics and stuff like that. It seems like you kind of have like the incumbents that, have a tremendous amount of market share. I don't know. It definitely wouldn't be a business that I would have gone and pursued because it doesn't kind of fit my criteria of like, generally consumable, high lifetime value products.
All right. So the other side of this coin is if you're a brand new entrepreneur, very often you get in your own way. And you overthink things and you don't take enough action. And so I kind of look at that and think, maybe for your first company, it's better to just fucking do something so you can get the wheels in motion and learn.
Yeah.
As opposed to trying to pick out the right thing. How do you look at that, kind of the juxtaposition between those two approaches?
Yeah, I've always been like incredibly action oriented. Whenever I've done like, disc assessments or stuff like that, like it always comes out and says like, I'm a quick starter, and that's just generally like how I do things. And, so I think it's always better to index towards, being action oriented than trying to like think things through. I mean, I was reading an interesting thread on X the other day where it's like you have these like super high IQ people that have like these amazing business ideas, but they will think through like every reason in which it can go wrong, and then they don't take action. So it's certainly much easier like as a second time entrepreneur because you've kind of gone through and like made a bunch of mistakes and, you just go through the learning lessons. I mean, I've even heard of like venture funds where they will only back like multiple time founders that are above a certain age. Which I think is kind of like an interesting strategy. So they've kind of really just nailed down on the fact that, you see a much higher success rate when people have done it once or twice.
Yeah. I mean, I think that another common narrative that I hear is you don't know what you don't know.
True.
And at some point you have to make decisions with imperfect information and just do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you just got to do it. At the end of the day, I think, it'll always be better to take action as an entrepreneur than just sit on your hands. And like, that's really what differentiates, entrepreneurs from, regular people. Like we're willing to take the risk, deal with the unknown.
Regular people.
Well, because it's true though. I mean, entrepreneurs have a much higher risk tolerance. They can deal with uncertainty, deal with the pressure where a lot of people like, that aren't entrepreneurs, that they, definitely index more towards job stability, certainty, predictability, routine. And a lot of that stuff kind of gets thrown out the window when you're trying to start something, completely from scratch. You have this idea and this vision for how the world should be, and then it's up to you to make it happen and then convince people all along the way that this needs to happen.
To that end, how much of your journey with Laundry Sauce was you were very deliberate in picking the vertical? How much of your journey was scripted and planned versus adjusted and accounted for as you went?
Well, I think the market really fascinated me because essentially kind of what my criteria is for an e-commerce.
Just to be clear, before you go into this, your market is fragrant laundry detergent.
Yes. Yeah. So laundry sauce, for those that don't know, it's essentially like designer laundry detergent. We've brought high-end fragrances to laundry pods, and then we have like dryer sheets, fabric softener, scent booster, et cetera, kind of like all the core laundry products. And we work with large fragrance houses behind, some of the most successful designer brands that you would all know of. And our perfumer has worked on, brands like Tom Ford and so forth, and kind of bringing fine fragrance and laundry together. And I think we really have created the best smelling laundry detergent in the world, and just created like a really elevated experience. But that wasn't necessarily the business idea day one, right? I thought laundry detergent was an interesting category to go after, because essentially, like, a lot of these D2C e-commerce companies have come in and like premiumized like all these like skincare or I don't know, clothing, you got like Warby Parker, you got like Away for Luggage, like all these kind of categories. You got like Dollar Shave Club, kind of created these like modern spins on, traditional commodities, right? And it seemed like laundry was a market that not too many like D2C brands have gone after, or if they have, like, it has been like the like really eco-friendly angle. So the reason why I like laundry is because it's got like a predictable consumption cycle, and you can't opt out. It's like, it's a non-discretionary consumer good. So whatever happens in AI, or if we have robots in our house, you're still going to need like soap and cleaning products, right? So I was like, okay, this can't go away. And then, it's a massive market, like everyone needs it. And then I could go acquire a bunch of customers with paid ads. Whereas in like software, usually the rate limiter on growth is like, how many sales reps do you have? And then when you like generate leads, like, which sales rep does it go to? Does it go to that rep or that rep? Because like the implied value of a lead might be different. Then you need account managers, and then you need a bunch of engineers to build the product, and so forth. So I knew I wanted my primary growth mechanism to be paid ads, because you can just scale super fast. Because if the unit economics are working, you could go from spending $1,000 a day to $10,000 a day to $100,000 a day. I remember just kind of talking with some other e-commerce entrepreneurs, and they're like, hey, like, how are you going to differentiate this? And my business partner and I were like, we don't know yet. We're just going to create a cool brand. I don't know. And then we kind of just went and looked at the market, where we're like, okay, well, no one has really brought fine fragrance to laundry. I think there'd be like a real interesting opportunity to do that. And then, obviously we've created a really exciting and high-end like brand identity around that too. And I think that the name lends itself well to creating that type of like experience and persona.
Well, one of the things that's interesting to me about what you just said is you listed a bunch of brands that have some sex appeal to them, but they have sex appeal to them because there's ego tied to it, right? A Tom Ford or a Louis Vuitton, or
of course,
designer clothing is tied to somebody's identity and ego. What laundry detergent they use, maybe not so much.
Sure.
Why do you think that, a designer laundry brand works? Who's your target market? And why do you think that it's taken off the way that it has?
Yeah. So we're not, quite, the designer like price points, right? So like, it is still a mass product. So like, kind of what my idea all along has been like, how do we create like the Louis Vuitton shopping experience, but provide, a mass product that a lot of people can resonate with, and just create a product experience that like truly is like next level. And really the reason people love it is because like fragrance is a very powerful, it's the number one driver for why people actually like purchase laundry detergent, or actually how they believe their clothes actually get cleaned, right? Like when your laundry comes out and it smells good, you're like, oh, it's clean. So
it's really weird.
I would say like most traditional laundry detergents, like your generic brands, kind of have these like industrial scents in a way. Like it just smells almost like synthetic chemicals. So when you can have something that smells like absolutely amazing, like your $300 bottle of cologne, because we literally use the same types of ingredients that your $400, $500 bottle of like Baccarat Rouge, has. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's not like 100% because, the same, because, spraying it on you versus like going through a whole wash cycle, there's different chemistry involved, and like it's somewhat, technically challenging. It was actually much more technically challenging than I thought it would be, because essentially what you're trying to do with a laundry detergent is remove oils and stains, but then you're also trying to deposit scent at the same time. So fortunately, we have some amazing scientists that have, brought some amazing technology to this category that we've been able to leverage. But the reason why people come back and buy more is just because essentially the way it makes them feel, right? It makes laundry day that much better. And laundry is typically a chore that people loathe. And, we get so many reviews where people are like, oh, I've never been this excited to do my laundry in my life. Like as soon as I got laundry sauce delivered to the door, I did a load of laundry. And I can certainly understand that because when I get new fragrances, like they deliver to my door for like testing and stuff, like I just go grab a load of towels. And I'm like, all right, let's see what this is all about.
Do your friends think you're weird because you talk about laundry all the time?
Well, what was interesting, so I had like 1000% conviction on this business. Like I just knew it was going to work because I had surveyed like all my friends. Like I did like 100 customer interviews, like essentially with my friends and like had them smell things and test it. And I got so much like validation out of it. I was like, oh, this is going to smash, like guaranteed. My business partner is a little bit more on the pessimistic side and I'm like kind of the optimist. And I'm thankful that my optimism has, I guess, kind of come true. There's always an opportunity to make money somehow, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, so you've got this massive space you're competing in, which means that there are a lot of competitors competing. Anything that's going to be commodity driven, you're going to run into that. You're also now going into, it's direct to consumer. So you're going into eCom competition in general. What do you think is going to happen with D2C brands in the next 5 years with the robots taking over?
Well, I think specifically with, being in a crowded marketplace, I think most CPG products are commodities, right? And brand is like the primary differentiator. If you think about like Nike, I mean, it's sure they have like some technology, but most of their stuff is like commodities, right? So, I mean, you have like Adidas, Reebok, or, so they've created these, large brands and it's like really their brand equity that keeps them, as these big businesses. Maybe they do have like some, distribution advantages, but I think a really interesting example to look at is liquid death. Like obviously like water is arguably the most commoditized product on the planet. And yet they came in with a highly differentiated brand and a different narrative and it like deeply resonated with consumers. And they also, they're essentially like a packaging company, right? They put water in a really cool can and now people want it. And then they've become, several $100 million company. Kind of interesting. And most people probably would have said, before Liquid Death had come along, like, are you really going to be able to come in and create like that disruptive of a water brand? I think there's always these opportunities if you can create a brand identity and like narrative or story that, deeply resonates with consumers. And it can be a little bit unconventional at times. Like, oh, we're going to start a water brand called Liquid Death. Like that's kind of nuts. And then I think to your next question, where do D2C brands go? I mean, I think ultimately you have to go omni-channel, right? You're trying to get as many points of distribution as possible and allows you to recoup, more of your marketing dollars. So I think when you're, on shelf in retail, you're selling on Amazon, you can be bought many different places. You're going to generate, more revenue for the same amount of marketing dollars.
Before we started, you talked about sort of the difference between scaling the app company over a long period of time and scaling Laundry Sauce really quickly. And you did so through paid ads. Are paid ads still sort of the holy grail for scaling eCom right now? Or is there another strategy that's super impactful outside of going full omni-channel?
I mean, I think ads are always going to be the primary growth levers. I mean, you look at like Google and Meta, right? Like those are, the advertising companies that probably consume like 80% or 90% of all ad dollars, right? And they're massive companies. And the reason why like they're that big and consuming all those ad dollars is because it works, right? So I don't see it going away anytime soon. And ultimately, at the end of the day, like you need to let people know that you exist, right? And people are always going to forget about you. So advertising is kind of that way to, consistently stay top of mind with people. And, ultimately you need you need compelling creative that people want to engage with. You need to have a product that people want to come back and buy more of. And, people need, but I don't see it going away anytime soon. But obviously there are alternative distribution paths and like affiliate being one of them. And, we have our ambassador program. So this is where we have influencers that love our brand and, want to promote it. And, it's a symbiotic relationship, but, essentially it's just a different ad unit, right? So whether or not like I'm paying Meta for the impression or, paying one of our ambassadors, to get it in front of their audience, like it's kind of the same, but a little bit different, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. I mean, are you paying for impressions with the ambassadors, or are you paying some rev share on the back end commission structure?
So I guess we kind of split it on. So we have our influencer program, and then we have like our ambassador. So ambassador is more along the lines of affiliate, where influencer, we're essentially trying to buy like an ad unit on their profile, right? Or typically like whitelist. So, whitelisting is an incredibly effective strategy for ecom brands because, you're essentially like borrowing their credibility as an influencer, right? They've established that trust and credibility, with their audience, and you're essentially renting that as a brand. And especially if they're authentic with the brands that they partner with, there should be some authenticity there, and you can still kind of maintain that trust with their audience. You're not trying to like necessarily exploit their audience, right? But yeah, I think that's effectively what you're doing. Is like you're kind of borrowing their credibility and trying to get your product in front of their audience and borrow that trust.
Can you describe the concept of whitelisting?
Yeah, so whitelisting is essentially when you'll have like an influencer will like essentially create an ad on your behalf and post it. And they can have it live on their profile, or they can have it as a dark post. And then you as an advertiser can use that post ID and run it in your own ads manager. So, we can run it to a broad audience or, a specific segment, or we can run it to their audience. So if it's a macro influencer that kind of has like broad awareness, if you're doing it with a celebrity or so forth, you're kind of borrowing their credibility. And then when people are scrolling through their feed, they're going to see it come from their profile rather than yours. And it looks a little bit less like an ad.
Macro influencers versus micro influencers, when and why?
Macro influencers are essentially like 1 million plus followers. And to me, it seems like, we've worked with macro influencers, Scott Eastwood being one of them. He's been a celebrity spokesperson for us and also an investor in Laundry Sauce, and it's been great. So it's been interesting. I mean, even hearing some of his stories where he's gotten out like at ballet and like obviously he's been in all these like crazy big movies and stuff, and then people are like, "Oh, you're the guy from the laundry ad." So I think our ads has done well for his career. But yeah, I think with these, like when you do these high production value campaigns, you're trying to create a kind of a moment in time in a sense. I think macro celebrities or macro influencers can definitely give you that little bit extra juice for it. And then kind of your micro influencers, your 10 to 100,000 follower type of influencers, you can kind of there's a lot more of them, right? And partnering with the right ones that have the right audience, the right aesthetic, kind of the right narrative. Like, so when we partner with someone that, like, we typically partner with people that have like nice aesthetic. They could be in the home care or cleaning space, and like those things have performed super well. But there's a lot of them, and you just got to sift through, you got to sift through a lot of profiles to find the right ones. And fortunately, we have a good team that helps with that. And, it's kind of like pay dirt for the business in a sense, because they typically, pay off, in the long run.
Yeah, I think that the most entrepreneurs have seen some wild success stories around influencer-driven marketing.
Yeah.
And most entrepreneurs fail to execute on that well. And I think that there are a lot of reasons for that. One is that there are a bunch of different ways to approach it. When you're going about finding influencers to promote your brand, do you do it through an agency? Do you do it by outreach directly? What is the approach that you use?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are these talent agencies that represent certain influencers, and they'll come to us, and we've done that occasionally, but really we're direct outreaching to people. One of the things that is also interesting with influencers, they are in the business of content creation, and if they have a certain number of followers, like clearly they've been very successful at it, right? And, as an advertiser, you're constantly buying content. So, whether it's UGC, whether it's, from, an agency where you're doing like a $50,000, $100,000 shoot, like I'm buying that content so I can run it as an ad. So when you're buying content from these influencers, even if you're not whitelisting it, you could just be buying it and, running it as an ad, right? And they understand like the trends. They know how to create like compelling edits that keep people like engaged. And I think that's kind of like an underrated hack, because these guys know how to create compelling content, and you find the right influencer. You can make some magic happen. Even stuff that's like, maybe a little bit more obscure, like for example, like ASMR type stuff, like those people that are very good at like, tapping on the box or, playing with the pods. So yeah, those can be executed well by the right influencer.
Yep, it's a weird world we live in.
Yes, there's a crooked spot for every crooked lid, right?
Yeah, for sure. So the outreach side of things, I want to get a little bit more granular because, yeah, totally. Because when you look at, if you think about this like sales and you say, yeah, great, we just have our sales team call them. Okay, how did that conversion happen, right? So, if you have Bob reach out to 1,000 people on Instagram, what's the response really going to be from Bob? Or if you have Susie do it, or if you do it from your corporate account, or if you do it from an owner's account, what does that look like when you're doing influencer outreach? What platforms? How do you approach it?
Yeah, so we're using a platform called Grin for kind of like managing all the affiliates and influencers. So it's kind of like Salesforce for D2C in some ways. And then you can, you get all the analytics data like feeding into there, which I think is also quite helpful to see just kind of like macro, like how you're doing. But yeah, I mean, we run it like a sales team, like straight up. And, there is some like AI automation that helps with some of this stuff, especially on TikTok, because TikTok is a bit more of like a spray and pray approach compared to like Meta. And you hear about all these people scaling like to crazy numbers on TikTok Shop. I mean, we got our TikTok Shop to 6 figures relatively quickly just by like upping the amount of like volume of our outreach, right? Where you're sending thousands of samples, and eventually like you just get enough shots on goal to where it works. And then even with that, like there's tools like called Talk Inviter, where you're essentially going out and you're doing this mass outreach. So that's maybe a little bit more on the spammy side. But I mean, it works. And that's kind of some of the best practices I've learned from people that are doing like, millions a month on TikTok Shop. But Meta is definitely a bit more of like personalized outreach. And yeah, we track like, how many people do we reach out to, how many ambassadors do we onboard? And then also like, what is like essentially the implied value of each ambassador? Because so say, I don't know, you move, I don't know, $100,000 a month of or you have $100,000 in sales, right? And say you have, I don't know, 100 influencers, right? You got $1,000 a month, per influencer, and like that's how much they're worth. So then, what does it cost you to onboard those? And you're essentially treating it like a sales team. And there's a lot of parallels, a little bit easier sale than like B2B SaaS. So, because you're essentially reaching out to someone saying like, hey, like I want to help you make more money, or like I want to pay you. Right. Versus, hey, Mr. Businessman, like I want you to pay me for my service.
Yeah. And it's probably easier with a sexier product at the same time. I guess it depends on the influencer, right? Some of them are like, yeah, fuck it. I don't know. Give me money.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and there's just certain product categories that are just like absolutely blown out, right? Like beauty is incredibly crowded because obviously the margins are sick, and like when it works, it works. Supplements are another one. So yeah. I'm sure they get like reached out to all the time where, like, damn, like another, one of these types of products where like, I'm sure there's not too many people reaching out to them about their laundry detergent. And then one thing that we can kind of like rest our hat on is like we legitimately have created the best laundry experience in the world. So like when you're like the Rolls Royce of laundry, like everything else is a downgrade, so it helps like knowing that we have the best product. And, I think the values that our brand like represents and stands for, and like our aesthetic, like helps represent them well. So like they want to promote products that that help their brand as well.
Yeah. Do you know who Perry Belcher is?
Yeah.
Perry's a buddy, and he was on the show a long time ago, but I've known him forever. And he said to me, and I think it was while we were recording, but he said, you know what else people who buy porn buy? And I was like, what, Perry? And he was like, toilet paper. And I said, oh shit. But the point is, laundry detergent is the type of product that you don't have to have a super logical influencer to sell, because everybody uses laundry detergent. So like you said, people that are just doing weird stuff that have niche followings probably also convert for you. Now, whether they convert as well or not, I don't know. Sure. But, me having a race car driver promote Easy Pay Direct is probably not as effective as me having an entrepreneur promote Easy Pay Direct or an eCom person, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the fun things about being kind of in a broad consumer category that everyone needs is like you can have all these different people promote your product. And then, it's also at a price point where you can impulse buy it. So it's not like this super high consideration product. And, you're going to have to buy it anyways. It's not like, oh, I'm going to stop taking my supplements maybe for a couple months or a year or whatever. Like as soon as you run out of laundry detergent, like, oh shit, I need it now. Cause you're not like, you're going to wear like basically the same amount of clothes each week, like predictable consumption cycle. So I'd probably say on average, people buy laundry detergent at least like 4 times a year. So you have these like, I don't know, kind of just macro like buying cycles that are just always happening. So you always have this opportunity to win the customer.
Yeah, I think that's that's an interesting lesson for anybody that's sort of shopping for what business to start is kind of your decision-making criteria that you went through to start in laundry. And then the other is for people that are entrenched in an existing industry and and they're way down the path and they're like, this doesn't apply to me at all. The question is, what other things are, tangential or supplemental to the space that you're in that do have a predictable buying cycle? And how do you broaden?
So I think you can kind of choose two different paths, right? You can do durable goods or like consumption, right? I know someone, he runs a hair care brand, and he said this. He's like, I just love every time that you use my product, it goes down the drain. So, similarly, I mean, like, so those are the advantages of like your consumables, like food, being one of those, or, your durable goods, like Manscaped is a very good example of a durable good that scaled like massively. But on the other hand, like they ended up getting into, kind of wet goods, right? They have like their ball deodorant, like their skincare, right? Like, so all these, products that go down the drain. So I don't know. I'm trying to think of some good examples of kind of, maybe $100 AOV type of products that are durable where, they don't have some like consumption cycle associated with it. Cause even like, I don't know, take like a home diffuser, right? Sometimes those can be a little bit expensive, but they're trying to get you on that subscription to buy those like fragrance oils. Like every business kind of needs some consumption aspect to it, unless you have something that's like a really high AOV product, like, furniture, for example. Like there's solid margins in furniture. You're going to buy it every so often. And I've seen guys do quite well. Like I have a business partner that has like a pool, or he's got a furniture company, and they've scaled it quite nicely. And I was talking to another guy this last week, and that ran a furniture company. So I don't know, I'm pretty like hell bent on like it needs to have a predictable consumption pattern. Because otherwise, like you kind of have like one opportunity to make money on the customer. I'll give you so one of my buddies, he runs a company called Culprit Underwear, and we were actually just going through this yesterday. So underwears, especially for guys, like you're probably going to buy, you buy a bunch of underwear. When are you going to buy like next time, like a couple years, year or two, right?
Probably more than that for most dudes.
Yeah, exactly. I think my brother, like, he's probably the worst at it. Probably buys underwear every like 10 years. Anyways, but like when we've been looking at some of the other, brands like MeUndies or Shinesty, like I was kind of like looking through their product catalog. They expanded into all these other products. Like they're doing pajamas, they're doing onesies, they're doing t-shirts and stuff. So like they kind of evolved. Like they might have started as for example, MeUndies, it's literally in the name. So they probably started off with underwear, and then they like kind of expanded out into all this other like comfortable clothing, where just because, when people buy, like, okay, hey, I got it. Like how many pairs of underwear do I really need? Because I can wash them, especially if they're using laundry sauce, right? So, they've had to kind of expand out into their product universe to, grow that customer. Because I think it's just really tough to build businesses where you have like one opportunity to make money on the customer. And then typically, those businesses where you are selling some widget, like, I don't know, it could be a Bluetooth speaker or headphones, where it's like you have this one hero product. Like if CPAs get out of whack, like you'll just basically go out of business. I think you can do a much better job at controlling like the LTV growth on a consumptive product by offering like a great product experience, a great customer experience, and like continue to win that customer over. And then, versus, trying to just win on reducing CPA as much as possible. I think there's much more room to go up in LTV than there is to go down in CAC.
Well, that introduces kind of an interesting question for me, because I'm in payments, Easy Pay Direct, fundamentally because one of the criteria that it met for me, and I got into payments very deliberately, And one of the criteria was residual by nature. Really nerdy, granular question, but how are you calculating LTV with something that's a subscription? Because you fundamentally have people that are on it for many, many, many years, right? So how do you actually go about approaching that?
Yeah, I mean, so on subscription, it's relatively easy to calculate LTV because you can just like basically look at your churn rate. But on one hand, you also have these certain decay curves that aren't necessarily linear, right? So
Right.
you might churn out a portion of your cohort, early on, and then like the later, then the people that have stuck, for example, like the people that stick around after 24 months, like your 24 to 36 month retention is going to be so much higher than your like 1 to 12 month retention, because it's like a self-selecting group. But I mean, there's just amazing tools that are available in Shopify to do this. I mean, Lifetimely is a $100, $200 a month app that you can just install and get all your cohort data, and then you can segment it by like what products they bought, if they're subscription or non-subscription, and you can plot that out. I mean, our finance tool does that as well, but that's a very, very important metric to understand. As an e-commerce business, especially if you're not profitable on first purchase, right? If you're profitable on first purchase, matters certainly a lot less. But I'd say like most like consumptive products, like you are taking a bit of a hit, so you're underwriting that LTV, and you need to know those numbers like implicitly, or else you could be in a pretty bad situation.
Yeah, well, or else you're just throwing it against the wall, right?
Yeah.
In other words, otherwise you're just spending money on ads and not really sure how that's going to shake out on the back end.
Yeah. One thing that's interesting, because like, we work, with fractional CFOs, and so forth. And, some of these like finance platforms just for like e-commerce companies. And I'll ask them like, what are the characteristics of the fastest growing companies, or like the best e-commerce companies like in, that you're dealing with. And they're essentially all subscription businesses. That's kind of what I've uncovered. And, I mean, subscription, like these purchases are just going to happen in the background. I mean, think about how many, like, some of the subscription products that you have, and you're like, oh shit, I meant to cancel it, but I reordered, whatever, I'll still use it. Right. And then that just keeps going for a couple extra turns. And that could be the difference of being profitable and not as a business.
Yeah, no question about it. I just apparently am a part of this private club in Austin for another year because of that reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like 2 months later, I'm like, oh, fuck, they billed me 2 months ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay, this is the interruption where I'm supposed to take money and let somebody else advertise on the podcast, but I don't really want to do that. So I'm going to remind you that I also own easypaydirect.com. And if you're a business that's accepting credit cards or needs to, beyond the fact that we can do a rate review to save you money, beyond the fact that we give you dedicated account reps, world-class customer service, world-class technology, and can actually optimize the way you accept payments online, you should understand why we have thousands of people a year come to us off of platforms like Stripe or PayPal, and why they prefer Easy Pay Direct. You can check us out at epd.com/BAM. That's epd.com/BAM.
Generally, subscription businesses do better than like one-time businesses. So I don't think I'll be starting any e-commerce companies that don't have a subscription component to it, to be honest.
I can't even imagine that, to be honest. Like the adding that difficulty in business where you've got a whole bunch of one-time sales it's an unnecessary element of business. If you're getting into business to design a profitable enterprise.
Well, let's take, for example, some of the hyperscalers in D2C eCom, right? Generally, the one, like if you take like Allbirds, like they scaled like crazy. But that's like, I mean, the shoes do have, like they wear out. You're going to need to buy new shoes. But like those guys like had a lot of success early on, and then like they've just gotten smashed. I mean, they were like $1 billion plus company at one point, and I think they're maybe like a $50 million or $100 million company now, something like that. I mean, it's just massive. And there's case studies written around it. One, because they like eroded a bunch of gross margin, and so forth. I mean, Warby Parker is kind of another one that I think scaled super fast, that had a lot of challenges further down the line, because how often are you buying glasses versus like something like an AG1. Like that's been a very, very successful business because I think it's subscription. I think if you were to just separate all the hyperscalers in e-com and look at the ones that are one-time customers, like mattresses, like Casper mattresses, like they went from 0 to 300 million, or 200 million in like 2-3 years. And I think that was another one that got this massive valuation and then just came crashing down later. That'd be an interesting analysis, maybe have deep research to it. I'm sure there's enough case studies online.
Yeah. Yeah. AG1's a super interesting one to me. I met Chris years ago. He kind of runs in similar circles, but he's been around forever. I mean, Athletic Greens has been around for 12 years or something, 15 years. I don't know. Long time. But it's also at a premium price point, and it was sort of a unique, unusual product. I think I say that a lot, unique and unusual. It's pretty much a synonym. It's a unique product that was really expensive that people didn't know about either. So that scale surprises me, which brings me to another question for you. And I'll use AG1 as a jump off here. He had one product forever, and all he did was sell one product, Athletic Greens. In fact, it wasn't until they're at significant scale where they're like, shit, we should probably sell other products. So let's rebrand this as AG1, and then we'll sell other things under our umbrella as well. Laundry sauce. At what point do you decide, I don't just want to do detergent, I'm going to sell the things around? When do you split your focus?
Yeah. So when we first launched, we literally just had like a white box and black box of pods, right? And it wasn't until almost a year later where we launched like a female forward fragrance called Egyptian Rose, and we launched our dryer sheets. And I don't know, we might have gone from 300K a month, like 500K a month, like, boom, overnight by like introducing those additional products. So, it helps unlock that incremental scale. So for us, like as we've launched additional fragrances, that's created variety and now kind of creates like more of a universe for people to participate in. Cause like, hey, I bought this fragrance, I want to try a new one, and it keeps it like fun and interesting. Like Dr. Squatch has done a really good job at that. Like they've created all these different fragrances, a bunch of different collabs, and they'll do like limited release fragrances as well. I think for us, I mean, we did like wool dryer balls, dryer sheets, fabric softener, scent booster. We just came out with like a fabric refresher spray. So we're kind of staying in the laundry universe. Like we'll come out with like a stain remover, things that just like generally make sense for laundry. But I think, product expansion is really key as a CPG business. For example, like that MeUndies that I was just talking about, right? They start off with underwear and then they expanded into all these other products because you need to be able to give your, customers that, like you an opportunity to spend more money with you. So I think it depends on the type of business, like how, out there you need to get. So, something like clothing, I think you have to have like a lot of different like varieties, whereas something that's like very, kind of simple in nature, predictable consumption pattern, like a laundry sauce AG1 or something like that, you can probably get away with having less products because people just need to come back and buy the same one over and over and over again. Generally, like once you build products, like for example, like I always use this, like Jack Daniels has been selling the same recipe for over 100 years or something. Maybe they've changed the bottle a little bit. So, you can build a great product. Like for example, like the chemistry of cleaning your clothes, like it's going to continue to work now and 10 years from now and 20 years from now. So, I mean, we do have like some, minor innovations on the formula or the formulation side, but generally it's like the same product. I mean, I'm going to be selling this, white box of laundry sauce for a long time. Right. And I love that. Whereas software, there's kind of like built-in entropy, right? If you're not continuing to innovate, like you're effectively dying. And I think that creates, a lot of challenges as the business. Cause like there's no software company that, unless you're maybe some of these like legacy enterprise providers that, cannot like really innovate on their code base for an extended period of time and still like remain relevant. And now you also have like AI that is getting more and more powerful, and maybe someone can knock off your business in a few prompts. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think that the AI conversation relative to SaaS is a really interesting one. Historically, what we've seen with software is the legacy providers stick there because they're entrenched into somebody's business operations, and so the stickiness of those products is really, really good. To rip out Salesforce from an org, that's a choice. And that's like a huge ordeal to redo that process. Now, like you said, with AI, maybe that's going to change in the next couple of years.
I think what AI is enabling is like vertically integrated SaaS in a sense. Like, for example, one of the reasons why Tesla is so efficient is because they like in-housed all their manufacturing and kind of like they've created their own in-house like custom software solutions to do everything. So they can like take raw materials and output a car. So like, how can you create those like hyper personalized for your business software solutions. And now AI might be able to knock that stuff out for you. So like, I think that is potentially where things are going, rather than, these one size fits all type of SaaS products for the enterprise.
March of 2025, what's the best use of AI for e-commerce?
All right. I will let people in on this. This is an amazing hack. Okay. What's really neat and something like what I love about this is, maybe when someone is listening to this 6 months from now, this might be a, completely different answer. Right. So
sure.
As of a couple weeks ago, Gemini 2.0 came out. Very, very powerful AI. And, it was at the top of LMSys for a while, which is like the AI, leaderboard. And what's really neat about Gemini is it allows you to have like massive context window. So the context window is essentially like how many tokens can you put in this before it, crashes essentially. So like, Claude has like a 250,000 token context window and you can only put in so much data. So what I was able to do is I took all of our customer reviews. So I took thousands and thousands of reviews. I took our annual survey data, so around 2,000 responses with a bunch of questions, highly granular data, and then enriched data from our customer data platform, and like smashed that all in together. And that was about like, it was roughly about 1 million tokens, and you can use Gemini's AI Studio, and you can upload CSVs and stuff, and then you can essentially query against that. So you can have it create like your customer personas. What is the type of language that people are using, most frequently in our reviews to describe our product. And then that can inform your ad strategy, landing page strategy, to use, language that, your customers are using, or like what types of emotions are people experiencing by using our product. So I think it's just so wild how you can take all this like data that a human would not be able to sift through, and then in 5 minutes get like some pretty insane results. So like I know exactly who our customer profile is and how they're speaking about our product, and then that goes into our brand identity. And so then when you're working with agency partners and so forth, they know exactly who your customer is and like what your brand is all about. So that's a pretty quick hack. And like before, I did that analysis with Claude because Claude was really the only one that could deal with that much data. But, that was only 250,000 tokens. So I had to really trim down the amount of reviews that I was using, the amount of survey responses. So I just had to have a lot less data. And now that I had this like much larger token or much larger context window, I think I got a more accurate result. And then I was able to compare like, what was it before and what was it after? And I think the after was more accurate.
Well, I love that. Love that as an idea. I mean, I think that the data analysis side of AI is a never ending, interesting conversation. And then the question is, what do you do with it and how do you execute?
Yeah.
The promise of agents, et cetera, is to take that data and then go do things with it. And right now, the analysis of the data is probably the starting point.
Yeah. Well, so an agent is essentially like an AI with additional context, right? That can do things for you. So when you have a really good overview of, what your company is, like, so I have like a company overview description for AI is like the base level prompt. So if I say, hey, like write an email for laundry sauce and I don't give it that context, like it just barfs out some garbage. Give it that context and now it's effective, right? So if you like have a copywriting guide for your brand, you have your whole brand overview, you have all your customer data and research, and now you set that as like the base level context. Now it can output some pretty amazing works for you. So I think that's how you effectively turn an AI into an agent that can actually do things that are useful for your business.
Off the shelf AI or trying to design something yourself?
I think off the shelf is fine. For the most part, it really depends on like what you're doing. And there are like, for example, like customer support is something you can't just use like a base level AI for, right? You can't just say like Gemini, now you're my customer support agent and just do everything, right? So like there's a lot of broader context that it needs, and like we use. There's a handful of tools out there for Shopify brands where it integrates with Gorgeous, which is one of the most like popular like help desk solutions for Shopify. So it can actually like train on your data and see all your previous interactions. So it's off the shelf in a sense, but because you're buying it from a software company, but it is customized all to your data. And they've spent a lot of, time, effort, and energy to make it so it can perform at that level. So, writing an email campaign, you could take just a normal, you just open the chat bot, give it the context and say, write this, versus, something that's maybe a bit more like workflow oriented and, needs to have like your FAQs and, access to your Shopify where, because like some of the number one questions you get is like, where's my order? Right. And that's like relatively easy for an AI to answer, but it has to be able to plug into the right data. So like that's where those software solutions can become like quite useful.
We started by talking about the transition in your path from Buildfire, which was a platform to build apps for people, to Laundry Sauce, which is a direct-to-consumer e-com company. Software is a nightmare to me personally, as somebody that has an in-house development team. But manufacturing things also seems like kind of a bitch. What was the transition like between those things, and what do you still find really difficult about a direct-to-consumer e-com company?
Before I even got into building mobile apps, I had built websites, right? And I kind of just approached it with a curiosity, like, how does the website work? How do you build it? Oh, what's this WordPress thing? Oh, I learned how to build all these websites and so forth. Then, really got deep into how to build software, but I'd never built a physical product before. So that was like totally foreign. So one of the things that we did is I used this service that basically finds you like industry experts. And on our first call, we got connected to this guy named Kimball, and he's now our mad scientist for Laundry Sauce. But he's got a PhD in analytical chemistry, worked at Unilever in the laundry division for a decade, like super sharp guy. And initially I was like, oh, you can just like buy laundry detergent on Alibaba. Like this stuff can't be that hard. And so he educated us otherwise. So he was the one that actually got us linked up with all of our contract manufacturers. And I think it really was incredibly useful to have that like in-house expertise, like someone on our side of the fence, helping to do like performance evaluation and just like knowing like how this industry, works. I would say for anyone like looking into getting into a particular product category, no matter how simple it may be, like find an industry expert that can help you. Because even if you have to pay them just a couple grand, for a few hours of consulting, like that can go a long way. So what's interesting with e-commerce is kind of how it's become like so modularized. Like a decade ago, you probably had to have your own engineering team, like building your website. Now, like it's pretty easy to do it on Shopify, and you can even use themes. So
or a ton of other platforms.
Yeah, exactly. Magento, WooCommerce. But yeah, Shopify is the 800-pound gorilla, I think, in D2C ecom now. Yeah. But there's essentially these abstraction layers where it's just gotten a lot easier, and you don't need to have these like technical expertise in house. And here's an example of like a very simple abstraction layer is you have like your 3PLs. So traditionally you'd have to have your own warehouse, you have to hire your own $15, $20 an hour warehouse workers, which is its own challenge. And, having to manage all that, like that sounds hard.
That's a dedicated business.
Yeah. So, and like, that's why I think, there's so many 3PLs is because like most people don't want to deal with it. So for me, it's like literally like just an API, like a physical server where, they need to move box from point A to point B. And, like we have a fixed cost per order, fixed pick and pack fee, and so forth. So, I mean, it's, if someone calls in sick, it's not my problem. It still costs me the same amount of, dollars per order to fulfill. And they've just made it so we don't need to worry about that headache. So we get to focus on like what we do best, which is, essentially product development, marketing, and so forth. So, and I think your question was, what's the most difficult part of it? So I think as a D2C e-commerce company, your primary lever for growth is creative, right? And you're essentially on this constant treadmill for creative. It's not like you can just produce this one ad that's amazing and just last forever. I mean, some ads have longer shelf lives than others, but you're essentially on this like constant like content treadmill. So being able to continually like source like winning creative, like that is probably the hardest part of the business. And then maybe the most frustrating part of the business is, CPAs could be X one day and then they go up 20, 30% the next day. And you're like, well, what happened? Like we're doing everything the same and now it just jumped overnight. So,
all right, let me break down a couple things here and then ask you questions about it. So first off, 3PLs, for those that don't do this, third-party logistics companies. And the fundamental idea there is that warehousing products and shipping them out is a bitch. So, like you said, having a warehouse is an independent business where you have a bunch of workers that are picking and packaging those things. And you have the ability now to just send them an API, and that whole function just takes care of itself.
Yeah.
The next thing that you said is that creative was at the core of one of the difficult challenges, because as an e-commerce company, you need to keep creating new ads all the time. And then you talked about the actual cost of the ads, right? And how that changes all the time and staying on top of that. Those things are core to the business. But I know that you've taken a ton of pride in building this company through leverage. So, how do you decide what stuff you need to learn internally, or you're going to trust an agency to create?
That's a great question, because we have leveraged agencies heavily throughout like the growth of this business. And I think it's very beneficial to use agencies early on, especially if you haven't done this before. And my saying is always like buy nice or buy twice. So it's just much easier to get it done right the first time. And I think it's really, momentum is really important in business, right? Because as you have more momentum, like it's easier to attract top talent, investors, tell a different story. So the fact that we scaled from like 0 to 10 million so fast, like that made it, much easier for me to kind of create this narrative around Laundry Sauce. Like this is a rocket ship type of company. And the reason why I think we had so much success so fast is because I brought in just like absolute experts in like every area of the business. So fortunately, like I had a lot of expertise when it comes to like running paid media and marketing. Like that's just, it's like being a technical founder in SaaS, right? Or, being an engineer and knowing how to code. So for me being a marketer, like it was harder to be in SaaS, right? Just because I'm not in there with engineers saying like, oh, the product needs to do this or that. I'm more or less trying to run the sales and marketing function. So, I mean, that's the primary driver of growth in e-commerce business. So like, I think that was like a very helpful skill to have. But one of the interesting things about e-commerce in particular is I think it has an amazing agency ecosystem. So with software, you can't just like hire an agency to go like run all your email marketing, because enterprise or software email, like you have to know in depth, like you still need to know who the customer is with e-commerce, but like we just sell like much simpler products. It's laundry detergent. It's simple, like simple system scale, or if you're selling food, everyone has experience with it, but not everyone has experience with a no-code app builder and like what problems we're solving for those businesses, or why it's like technically challenging to build your own app. So I think these, you can look at these agencies that are working with brands that you respect and like, and you're essentially getting their like broader expertise on the industry. So for our email marketing, like we hired an agency for that, and they did a phenomenal job. They know exactly what all the flows are and like what's working with their other clients, and you kind of get those like cross learnings. So kind of one of the disadvantages that you have of like in-housing something is you just don't get that broader expertise. So like if you have a agency running your meta ads, and say something happens and CPAs go up 30-40% in the day, you're like, is that just happening to us, or is this happening across the whole portfolio of brands? And they can look at 20 other ad accounts in that day and like, oh no, like it's not your fault. This is happening to everyone right now. It's just a weird day because something happened. Like for example, when the LA fires happened, CPAs got all out of whack because like that was just a captivating moment in time where everyone's posting about it, and like people are not out buying stuff off the internet, right?
Yeah.
So like you can kind of gut check things with an agency when they have that, and generally I've had pretty good luck and success working with agencies. So I don't know if I specifically answered your question, like which ones do you in-house and like which ones do you outsource? And I mean, I think you can still have both in-house expertise and outsource it at the same time. Like, cause you could have a paid media manager that manages, maybe 1 or 2 channels internally. And then you might use an agency for some other channels, or they might help you with creative and also maybe give you some oversight on the ad account. So it doesn't have to be entirely binary, like in-house or agency. It can also be a mix of both depending on the function.
Yeah. No, I think that those are, there's tons of good takeaways with that. One of the things that I heard that it made me think of was you were talking about the specificity of the agency and the benefit to them having a ton of experience in your specific space. When I hire, made me think of the hiring process for salespeople. And when I interview salespeople, the type of sales that they've done is tremendously important. And that's true on every possible level. And there are people out there that say things like business is business or sales is sales. And I think that that's bullshit. Like, I think there's some truth to it, but no. But look, if you're good at selling a B2B product with a long sales cycle to enterprise clients, that is completely different than a direct to consumer product that has a quick sales cycle. Totally different. And similarly, when you're looking for salespeople, or similar to that, if you're looking for marketing agencies, you need to look at the track record of the exact product they've sold. And probably an eCom company that's done, or a marketing agency that hasn't done subscriptions, is going to be different than one that's done subscriptions through and through, right?
Yeah.
Or they've done low dollar amount versus high.
Yeah.
For all the reasons that you've said, right? You've got impulse buys that make sense, or they don't. And that alone could be the difference of your ads being effective or not.
I couldn't agree more. Yeah, I mean, like a $5,000 AOV product versus a $100 AOV product, high consideration, low consideration. That's almost like a B2B, like enterprise sale, or like a low ticket, high velocity sale. So yeah, and I think, for example, if you have an agency where all they do is email marketing, they're probably gonna be pretty good at it. Like, they have a lot of institutional knowledge, and you are essentially, renting that or borrowing that. When you work with these agencies, and especially early on, I feel like it's good to work with an agency that has that particular institutional knowledge or expertise in a particular area to at least just get it set up right the first time. And then if you want to backfill it later, at least you've set the benchmark. So when you hire someone internally, it's like, hey, you got to beat this, right? And I think that's a really valuable tool. And what I absolutely love about e-commerce is how everything is measurable. Like, when you run a split test, which one actually generated more revenue? It's not which one generated more leads, and then which sales rep did those leads go to, right? And then you got a 90-day sales cycle, so it takes so long to understand, the actual like implications of that, where I just know this one generated 10K more revenue than this one, or something like that. And it's very easy to measure. So everyone can be measured. And it, like, I guess on the email marketing topic, like, you could say, hey, you could test two agencies. It's like, hey, you do 3 emails that are campaigns, you do 3 emails that are campaigns, and we'll just run them, and then we see who does better. And you could actually split test every single one. So,
yep. Well, as somebody that has, a long sales cycle conversion process,
yeah.
I'm jealous.
Yes.
Yep, I'm jealous. The last question I have on that, though, is when you have a bunch of money, it's easy to say that. When you're young or new or bootstrapped, do you still think people should pay for the expensive agency first and at least set that benchmark and roll the dice, or not?
I think it depends what type of business that you're trying to build. If you're trying to build a $1-2 million a year lifestyle business, then yeah, you should probably try and save every dollar. But it depends if you have a savings mindset or an abundance mindset too. I'm not here to build, $2-3 million a year e-commerce businesses. Like, I'm here to build like $100 million plus e-commerce businesses. So I think the decision criteria that I go through is like a lot different because I have a much bigger vision. And then I think also playing in the space, like it's a big space. Like, it doesn't make sense to play small for me. So I certainly index towards bringing the best and brightest in. And if you don't have the money, like, there's plenty of people that, like, if you have a legitimately good business idea and you have enough traction, like, people will fund it. So I think you just take 2 types of businesses, like the ones that don't take funding and the ones that take funding. The ones that take funding, like, in aggregate, are much, much, much bigger than the ones that don't. Like, it's very rare to hear about companies that become incredibly successful, totally bootstrapped. It absolutely happens, but it's definitely a lot rarer than, ones that go raise institutional capital. And I think if you go look at a lot of the VCs, in D2C eCom or SaaS, I mean, those are like the big companies, right?
Yeah, I'd be curious to see those stats side by side, bootstrap versus VC backed, because the success rate of VC backed companies is horrific. But when they win, they win.
Yeah. Also depends on what stage you're investing at, right? Because there's some that, like growth equity probably has a much higher batting rate because it's much more like private equity because it's like they're only investing in like companies that have 30 million in revenue or something like that versus
that
like
are already
angel.
established.
Yeah, because like angel investing, yeah, like terrible like hit rate. It's like 1 in 20, 1 in 30 that actually really
If,
work.
yeah,
So I think it kind of depends on the stage in which you're getting in at, right?
yeah, that's a good point. That makes sense, but it depends how you define success. But I would say that I think it goes back to your point, right? The outcome that you're after is really what dictates that choice. But there is probably a higher percentage of people that establish and hold on to small businesses that sustain their lifestyle and create a lifestyle for them. Um, yeah, over time, I would think. Then the funded ones that go out and take a bigger swing, but that's probably pretty logical anyway.
Yeah, and maybe the businesses that take on funding are much bigger, right? But the founder might not make as much money if they stay small, right? Because like there's that trade off because you are,
That's very real.
yeah,
I think that there's an illusion for people, and I talk about this quite a bit, but I think there's this illusion with somebody that's like, oh, yeah, I've got a $50 million company. And so people think that they're making a shitload of money. And it's like, no, they diluted everything and they don't take anything in distributions and they have a relatively moderate salary.
yeah,
And they're hoping for the sale. But even on the sale, they've diluted so much that they're not going to make a killing when they sell.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, so
Trade-offs.
it all depends on what type of business that you're trying to build, right? And some businesses lend itself to being a big business and some don't. Like not every CPG product is able to be funded by venture, right? Because venture is looking for these big outsized returns. And if you can't go build, 50, $100 million plus a year company, then they're just not interested.
A newer entrepreneur that's just getting into ecom, what advice do you have for them?
Seek wisdom and expertise from others. It makes your life a hell of a lot easier because one,
But what
people.
if you're arrogant and you already know everything?
Good luck. I think that was probably one of the biggest like strategies that we had is like from very early on we brought on our first advisors are the guys that started a company called Raindrop and they're the branding agency behind like all the Dr. Squatch videos and helping to scale Dr. Squatch into like multi-$100 million year business. So I actually hired like, and people are willing to sell their time like relatively cheap, to be honest, like relative to their impact. All right. So you could pay someone a grand or two a month and like they'll give you a couple hours. Like that's, and those hours can be so impactful. And then they'll also open up their Rolodex and you kind of get this like whole compounding nature. It actually turned out where they loved our idea so much, they became our first outside investors. And then they created our first like anchor videos. And then that, like those videos like told our whole brand story, which then made it much easier for me to go off and raise capital from other people. Cause I could say, hey, watch this. I'm like, oh, I get it, and kind of back to that whole thing of like momentum creates momentum.
So invest in wisdom from others.
Yeah.
What's the best investment you've made in yourself that has directly paired to growth of the company?
So I started
Your
off.
Lamborghini?
Well, then I'll get to that. Those have paid off. So I started like the first entrepreneur group I participated in is one was called YEC. It was like founders under 40 had to do over $1 million in revenue. And I was a part of the community for a little bit and they had the snowboard trip up at Powder Mountain. And I was like, you know what, if I don't go on this trip, like I'm not going to like really get much value out of this membership. So I went and met some amazing friends that are still my friends today. And it's like maybe a decade later. And I participated in Dan Martell's mastermind, and then that got me the invite to Baldface later down the line. That's how we met. So participating in some of these like networking groups can have like massive dividends because sometimes it's just like if you go and you leave with one or two friends from these trips, like they can be incredibly impactful. And then you get this whole network effect. Like all you need is like one or two nodes that give you this entry to like all these other nodes that then all compounds and you can get a lot of value out of networking. So I'd say that's probably been the highest ROI like investments I've made in myself is just participating in some of these groups, these entrepreneur groups, because you learn so much from other people. And entrepreneurs are generally willing to share and like help other people, right?
It's super interesting to me how open people are in all the groups that I'm a part of.
Yeah.
And I couldn't agree with you more. I think that relationships drive everything else. and unique experiences drive relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And if those unique experiences also cause some sort of heightened emotional engagement, even more so. And I
Yeah.
think that's one of the reasons that something like Baldface
Yeah.
is so engaging, because you're out like, doing ridiculous jumps off of cliffs,
Yeah.
riding around cats in the middle of nowhere, trapped together.
Yeah, totally.
Do you see a parallel there with owning exotic cars and racing them?
Yeah, so I've always loved exotic cars. I bought my first McLaren when I was 26, and I joined a club called Fastlane Drive when I was living in San Diego. I happened to just know someone that was in it. They're like, "Hey, you should join and be around all these other supercar owners." And I was like, "Oh, I'm totally down. Like, this sounds super exciting." So I joined, met amazing entrepreneurs. The social experiences were tons of fun, and what's interesting about cars is there's a lot of different ways to make money. So like when we at Baldface, it's a lot of like software guys, info product guys, and maybe some eCom guys, right? It's kind of the general theme, right? And I found that in some of the other masterminds that I've participated in, where it's kind of like a lot more narrowly focused. So, with exotic cars, like you might have doctors, lawyers, people in finance, construction, real estate, etc. So a little bit broader group of people. So I was living in San Diego at the time, and COVID happened. I'm like, I get to get the hell out of California. So I ended up moving out to Arizona. And the founder of Fastlane was like, "Hey, you should start a chapter out in Arizona." And I'm like brand new to the area. I don't know anyone. And yeah, kind of hard to start a car club when you don't know anyone. So I got linked up with a few other guys, and like Fastlane has ultimately become like the basis for my whole social life. And now it's like 3.5 years later, and we have like 140 members here in Arizona, and then we have like now 18 chapters across Fastlane worldwide, which is just unbelievable. So I get to be around like these hyper successful people all in Arizona, and we do an interview process for everyone that joins, and like I just get to kind of hop on like this and have just super cool conversations with people that have sold their companies for hundreds of millions, or, you got guys that just bought their first supercar. But, that community is very interesting, and people are generally a little bit extra, when you're buying, $300,000-$400,000 cars, you got to have a little bit of a screw loose, think differently than most. And like, that's what I love about entrepreneurs is like, we just see the world differently. So it's been a massive component to my success, I think, participating in these communities. And, I think cars, yes, they're expensive, but I think the value you can get out of them through the communities like far outweighs the cost of the car.
I love that. So you're going to take me for a drive, or you're going to let me drive sometime?
100%. We're going for a drive.
Fuck yeah. I love it. Ian, Blair, I appreciate you carving out time, man. If people want to find out more about you or Laundry Sauce or Fastlane, where do you want to point them?
So you can go to laundrysauce.com and choose from a wide variety of scents. It'll be the best laundry experience of your life. You can connect with me on Instagram at IanBlair44. And then if you want to see what we're doing at Fastlane, it's at Fastlane Drive on Instagram. You'll see a bunch of cool car content.
Love it, man. Thank you so much. Until next time.
My director of marketing told me to read this. Thank you for tuning in to Beyond a Million. If you liked this podcast, please subscribe and drop a comment below. We'd love to know your thoughts. If you want to learn the strategies that our guests such as Neil Patel, Amy Porterfield, and Grant Cardone use to scale their business, you can find more episodes on our website at beyondamillion.com.